You're listening to the weekly Parsha Podcast with Ari Goldwag, recorded with Hashem's never-ending assistance in Ramat Beit Shemesh Israel 5781, 2020. This week's Parsha, we don't have a Parsha, but we do have a wonderful holiday called Succos. I'd like to share with you a thought in regards to the sukkah, that special booth that we enter. We leave our homes, we enter into this area, the tzila de mehemnusa, the shade of Hashem, the shade of our faith in Hashem. What is the idea behind the sukkah? What is the idea of the obligation to sit in the sukkah? What is the idea? The Gemara in Sukkah on Daf Beis Amud Aleph tells us that the sukkah, and it brings a verse, we'll see that verse inside shortly, that there's a verse in Yeshaya and Isaiah that tells us that the sukkah needs to provide shade for us. The tzila de mehemnusa, the shade of our belief, the shade, the kanfei hashchina, the divine wings, as it were, which protect us, just like they did in the times of the Midbar. Let's see the pasuk. It tells us in Parsha Zemor, Vayikra Perek Chaf Daled, pasuk man beis, Basukah Sev Shivas Yamim. The verse tells us there's an obligation to sit in the sukkah for 7 days. Kol Ha'ezrach b'Yisrael yeshvu basukos. All of the inhabitants of the land of Israel, all citizens of Israel have an obligation to dwell in a sukkah, in a booth. Why do we have to do this? What's the idea behind it? The verse tells us, in order that your generations should know that I sat you in Succos by Mitzrayim. The Jewish people, they dwelled in booths as they left Egypt. Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am Hashem your God. The Gemara in Sukkah Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis tells us that it's not so simple that they sat in booths. We're not specifically commemorating the booths. In fact, we paskin that it's not just booths. It's not just these little huts that they slept in, that they lived in, but rather it was the Ananei HaKavod, the divine presence, which was represented by the clouds of glory that Hashem put upon the Jewish people, which protected them, which paved the way for them, protected them from all of the dangers of the wilderness, from the rain, from the sun. That's what we are commemorating as we walk into our sukkah. The sukkah tzel tzel yamim, as we said, there's an obligation that the schach, the sukkah that we sit in, and the schach that covers it, has to provide us with shade. This is the essential component of the sukkah, is the concept of shade. What is the idea of shade? What does it mean that we sit in the shade of the sukkah? What is the concept? So I'd like to share with you an amazing thing, an amazing idea. The Gemara in Sukkah tells us, very interesting halacha. If your sukkah is too high, if your sukkah is more than 20 amos high, about between 20 and 30 feet, maybe 40 feet high, right? If it's so high, so then it's not going to be kosher. The Gemara has a few different opinions. Why is it that it can't be so high? But one opinion is because your sukkah, the main concept of sukkah, the word sukkah comes from the word schach. Schach means the covering, the top, the roof that you place upon your sukkah. And that schach has to provide the shade. And now if the roof of your sukkah is too high, so then the schach is not providing the shade. The walls are providing the shade. The Gemara brings a pasuk. It says, "V'sukkah tiyeh tzel yamim echayv." The pasuk in Yeshaya we mentioned earlier. The sukkah shall be a shade from the day, from the hot sun. So, in order for the sukkah to be able to be a shade, the schach to be a shade, so now we need it to be a certain height. It can't be too high. Now the Gemara addresses an important question, because if we look at that pasuk, and I'd like to see it inside with you, the pasuk in Yeshaya, is not talking about a sukkah of Sukkos. It's not talking about a sukkah of Chag. Pasuk says, there's going to be a sukkah in the future time. It's talking about the times of Moshiach. When the Messiah arrives, there's going to be a sukkah that Hashem is going to spread. There's a booth of peace, a sukkah of peace, which Hashem is going to spread out over Jerusalem, over the inhabitants of Yerushalayim, over the people of Israel. What is this sukkah? We mention it also in our Harachaman, in the benching. We say, Harachaman Yokim Lanu is Sukkos David Hanoifolis. Return to us the fallen booth of King David. We refer to the Beis Hamikdash as a sukkah, as a as a booth. What is the idea of this sukkah of the future? Are we commemorating a sukkah of the past? Are we commemorating a booth? Or perhaps the Ananei HaKavod, the divine clouds that we sat in, the clouds of glory that Hashem protected us with in the past, in the times of the Midbar? Are we commemorating something that's going to occur in the future? It needs to have shade. What's the idea that the sukkah needs to provide us with shade? We know from a verse that's to do with Moshiach, with the Messiah's arrival. What is the idea that we'll need a sukkah in the future when Moshiach comes? And what is the idea of nestling in the shade under the protection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of God? And how does it connect to the idea of tzila d'mamnusa, which we mentioned at the beginning a few times, the shade of belief, the shade of our faith in Hashem? What is the idea? So I want to read one verse back in Yeshaya. I want to read to you a little piece of a medrash in the pasuk of Sukkot. I wanted to read to you from Tehillim, the Psalms. Yeshiv b'seiser elyon b'tzel shakayis lenam. That King David encourages us to dwell, to sit, according to one understanding of the verse, in the shade, under the shade and the protection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What is the idea of tzel? What is the idea of shade? Pasuk says, "Uvar Hashem al kol mechoin har tzion v'mikra'eh anon yoimam v'ashan v'noiga ish lahava laila k'kavei chupa." There is a protection. What is the protection of the sukkah? What is the sukkah that it's going to be in the future in the times of Moshiach? What is the sukkah that protects us from? There's going to be a great danger. The sun is going to be taken out of its nartik, out of its sheath. And there's going to be danger. There's going to be a time of fire in the day and the night. And we're going to need a protection from that fire. We're going to need a protection from that intense heat of the sun. What is this heat of the sun that we're talking about here? What is the idea? What is the concept? In order to understand, so let's look at a medrash. The medrash tells us like this. Amar Rabbi Levi says, whoever fulfills the commandment of sukkah in this world, God says, he fulfilled the commandment of sukkah in this world. I'm going to protect him in the world to come, in the time to come, from this intense sun. There's a pasuk in Malachi, similar to the pasuk in Yeshaya. It says there's going to be a day that's going to come, katanur. It's going to be as hot as an oven. There's going to be a time in the future when there's going to be a judgment on the Rishaim, on those who are evil. There's going to be a downfall of those who have done evil. Hashem is going to take out this sun of judgment. And in that time, Hashem will take a sukkah, a protection. And the righteous ones, and it seems those who are indeed doing the mitzvah of sukkah properly, those righteous ones will be protected. Hashem is going to hide them inside of that sukkah. Verse in Tehillim in Psalms in chapter 27, verse 5 says that Hashem will hide me in his sukkah on the day of evil. There's a time when we need protection. What is the time when we need protection? When Hashem brings out his judgment. Hashem brings out his judgment on the world. Where do we see an example of this? I've mentioned this in years past. It's also in my Sefer, Perfectly Imperfect. That Avram Avinu, he was sitting in the heat of the day. And Rashi there tells us, Hashem hoitzi cham min artika. Hashem took out the sun from its sheath. There was about to be a great din in the world, a great time of judgment. Sodom and Amorah were about to be destroyed because of their evil. And Avram Avinu at the same time was about to conceive with a son named Yitzchak. At times, and this is what I've written about, spoken about, at times we enter a time of judgment, a time of danger, a time when Hashem is bringing the world into a new place, a new level, a new stage. And in order to get into that new stage, Hashem, as it were, brings out his son. And that son brings about judgment on the world. Now, how does a person protect it from the judgment? It's by entering into the sukkah. What is the concept of the sukkah? It's a place of tzel. It's a place of shade. Interestingly, the word tzel also means lehatzil, means to save. Hashem saves a person. For that, I'd like to bring you to the pasuk in Psalms, chapter 91. Tehillim Tzadi Aleph. Pasuk there says, Yeshiv v'seiser al yain. Someone who wants to be protected properly, so he needs to sit in the secret place of the Most High. B'tzel shakayis leinon. He needs to sleep and rest in the shade of Hashem. What is the idea? What does it mean to nestle in the shade under the wing of Hashem? It means to place one's faith in Hashem. I will trust in Hashem. When you are in His shade, tzel, He will save you from the plagues, from the destruction. Hashem will cover you with His wing. Under His wing you will be protected. Don't be afraid of the night, from the arrows that are springing out in the daytime. Don't be afraid of the plagues. Don't be afraid of anything. When a person has faith, we say it's the tzila. The sukkah is a place of faith. It's a place where we nestle in the shade of God under His wing. I know I keep repeating the same words over and over again, but I want to repeat it because I want it to penetrate. This is just such a deep depth and importance here. What does it mean to be under the shade of Hashem? It means to trust in Hashem. It means to place our faith in God. We step out of our homes. We're very protected in our homes. The Torah tells us, "Tzemi diras keva, v'shev diras sarai." It's Gemara in Sukkot daf Beis Amud Aleph. Also, leave your permanent dwelling place. Instead, live inside of a sukkah. A sukkah is an impermanent dwelling place. It's a place where we don't feel as secure per se. Why? In our homes we feel very secure. We can lock all the doors. In fact, last night I locked the door to my sukkah. I locked the door that leads into my sukkah on my mirpesat. We feel very safe in our homes. We walk out, we step out into the tzila de mehamnusa, into the shade of Hashem's protection. Now that's a different kind of place. If I'm doing everything, and of course a person is obligated to protect his health. But if I'm walking outside with a mask, and with a face shield, and in a bodysuit, and that's how I have to go everywhere because I'm afraid I'm going to get sick, that's not what Hashem wants. That's not Hashem's desire. A person is obligated to do normal hishtadlus, put in normal efforts. But a person is a person is mainly obligated to place his faith in Hashem, to place his bitachon. I will say, Hashem, you are the one who protects me. I will trust in you, Hashem. I will trust in Hashem. When you step out into the sukkah is a place, the gematria of the word sukkah is 91. It's the gematria of the name Aleph Daled Nun Yud, Hashem's name, the Yud Kei Vav Kei name, those two numbers 65 plus 26 together. The sukkah is a place where we connect intimately to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to God, but in a different way than we're used to. We step out of our comfort zone. We step out of our normal way of protecting ourselves, and we walk into the sukkah. And when we do that, Laman Yedidor Sechem Kiva Succos Hashaftis B'nai Yisrael. It wasn't just that Hashem placed us in booths. There's a big difference between what happens when we are in charge of protecting ourselves, when Hashem's in charge of protecting ourselves. There's a limit to what we can do. A person can walk around in a mask and in a face shield and in bodysuits and still get corona. Chas v'shalom. He could still become sick. But if a person places his bitachon in Hashem, if a person places his complete and absolute faith in Hashem, it's a different story. When he walks through the midbar, there's no food to eat. Hashem gives him the food. When he walks through the midbar, there are mountains and valleys. It's very difficult. The Ananei HaKavod, the clouds of glory, would smash the mountains. It would flatten the earth, fill in the holes of the valleys, protect them from the hot sun. What does that mean? Protect them from the rain, the pasuk says. The sukkah serves as a protection from the rain, from the hot sun, from din, from judgment. Because there's a physical structure, there's a literal structure, but then there's an emotional and spiritual structure, which is what we're trying to build over the Chag of Sukkos, which is what we're trying to develop an awareness of inside of ourselves. We've been working on this for years. We've been working on trying to understand what does it mean, and how can we apply the idea of bitachon, our faith in Hashem. And the Sukkah offers us that opportunity. And it says, we've got these big houses, these protected, well-protected homes. Step out of the house and walk into a place which is less protected. Why? Because you need to depend on Hashem. You need to realize that it's not your efforts that protect you in the first place. Perhaps it's Hashem putting ideas in your mind in order for you to be protected to a certain extent. But ultimately, Hashem is the one who decides everything. And if a person wants to be protected from a time of judgment, from a time when there's a plague in the world, from a time when Hashem is taking the sun out of its nartik, He's taking the sun out of its sheath in order to bring the world to a new level, to a new place, to a new madrega, to a new spiritual level in the world. Perhaps to bring about a certain peace between Israel and its neighbors. Perhaps to bring about a certain sense of urgency for Klal Yisrael to return to Eretz Yisrael. All of these things, in order to be protected from them. This is the time that we have to work on our bitachon, our faith in Hashem, our trust in Hashem, our absolute belief, and not just belief, but we look at our experience and we see Hashem has protected us in the past. He's taken care of us in the past. He's going to take care of us again. That is the message of these psukim. If they remember what happened in the past, what happened in the times of the Midbar when Hashem protected the Jewish people as they traveled through the Midbar. But what does that have to do with the future? What does that have to do with the times of Moshiach? And the answer is that to get into the times of Moshiach, we have to traverse a time of din, a time of judgment, a time of danger, a time when the Rishaim are to be destroyed. In order to get to the other side, there's only one way. There's only one way to get there intact, and that is to attach ourselves to bitachon, to attach ourselves to the tzel, the shade of Hashem. The shade of Hashem is that which is matzil, saves us. And what's the idea? It's because, when we're under the shade of Hashem, when we're under His wing, so we remember. It's a reminder to us. It's not us. It's so easy to get caught up in all of the things that we believe give us our parnasa. If I go to a certain place, I will be able to come back with money. If I do a certain job, I'll have money. Hashem is shaking us up. Hashem is shaking up all of the order of the reality. There's only one way to survive this. It's by nestling under His wing, nestling under His shade, recognizing that it is He. It is He who is the one who is protecting us and is going to continue to protect us, just as He protected us in the past. So too He's going to protect us in the future. So I want to bless you and I ask you to bless me. Hashem should help all of us, that we should be able to use the opportunity of the sukkah, stepping out of our place of protection, to understand the message, to remember how Hashem protected us in the Midbar. Hashem should help us remember what He did then to us. Hashem should help us to remember what He's done in our personal lives, to help us throughout all of the years of our lives. Hashem should help us to have that faith, that assuredness, that confidence, that just as He's protected us in the past, so He will be protecting us today, and so He will protect us for all time in the future. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos and a wonderful Yom Tov.
This podcast was made possible through the gracious donations of listeners like you. For more podcasts like this, please visit www.arigoldwag.com or search on iTunes Ari Goldwag.